Can someone please explain this to me? The Endangered Species Act is supposed to be a law based on clear facts, numbers, and science. Not feelings, individual interest, corporate goals, or personal beliefs. Somewhere in America, right now, an animal is disappearing. Not metaphorically. Not in some distant, abstract future. Right now, today, species that have lived on this continent for tens of thousands of years are slipping past the point of no return. Their habitats are gone. Their numbers are too small to sustain themselves. And in many cases, the people who are supposed to be protecting them are spending their limited time and money somewhere else entirely. This is a story about a law that works. And about how politics, money, and institutional self-interest are slowly breaking it from the inside. This is the story of the Endangered Species Act. Segment 2. What is the Endangered Species Act? It is December 28, 1973. President Richard Nixon signs a piece of legislation that, at the time, draws relatively little public attention. But the Endangered Species Act, the ESA, will go on to become one of the most powerful environmental laws ever written in the United States. Possibly in the world. In plain terms, the law does three things. First, it identifies plants and animals that are at risk of extinction and places them on a protected federal list. Second, it prohibits activities that would harm those species, or destroy the habitats they need to survive. This applies not just to private citizens, but to federal agencies themselves. If a government project would damage critical habitat, the law can stop it. Third, and this is the part people often forget, it directs the federal government to actively work toward recovering those species. Not just to keep them alive on a list. To bring them back to the point where they no longer need that protection. The law is administered by two federal agencies. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service handles land and freshwater species. The National Marine Fisheries Service handles ocean life. Together, they carry the legal and scientific responsibility for every species on the list, from the moment it's added to the day, ideally, it's removed. The track record is remarkable. Scientists credit the ESA with preventing the extinction of the bald eagle, the gray wolf, the Florida manatee, the American alligator. More than 1,600 species in total. Roughly 99% of everything listed under this law has avoided extinction. 99%. That number should make us proud. Instead, it's become a cover story for a system that is slowly being hollowed out. Segment 3. How do animals get on the list? Getting onto the endangered species list is not supposed to be a political decision. The process is designed to be driven entirely by science. Here's how it works. Anyone, any person, any organization, any government agency, can petition the Fish and Wildlife Service to consider listing a species. The agency then has 90 days to decide whether that petition presents enough credible biological information to warrant a closer look. If it does, a full 12-month scientific review follows. During that review, agency scientists examine the best available data against 5 specific factors. Is the species' habitat being destroyed or severely degraded? Is it being overhunted, overfished, or overcollected? Is it threatened by disease or predation? Are existing laws failing to protect it? Or are there other natural or human-caused factors pushing it toward extinction? If one or more of those factors applies, the species can be listed as either threatened, meaning it's likely to become endangered, or endangered, meaning it's at immediate risk of extinction. Critically, the law explicitly forbids the consideration of economic factors in a listing decision. The question is supposed to be purely biological. Is this species in danger? Not. How much will protecting it cost a rancher, or a developer, or a mining company? That protection sounds strong. But in practice, it has been tested over and over again. The Fish and Wildlife Service routinely lacks the staff and funding to process petitions on time. Species sit in bureaucratic limbo for years. And while they wait, their populations keep declining. Segment 4, Recovery Goals and Methods. Being listed under the ESA was never meant to be permanent. The law envisions a specific arc. A species is identified as imperiled. Protections go into place. Those protections work. And eventually, the species recovers enough that it can be removed from the list. That removal is called delisting. And it's supposed to be a cause for celebration. The primary tool for getting there is something called a recovery plan. Federal agencies are required to write one for every listed species. A good recovery plan answers 3 questions with scientific precision. What does a healthy, self-sustaining population of this animal actually look like? What specific threats need to be eliminated or reduced? And how will we know, with measurable, objective data, when we've gotten there? The methods used to actually achieve recovery vary enormously, depending on the species and the threat. For the California condor, it meant capturing every single wild bird and placing them in a captive breeding program before reintroducing them to the wild. For the gray wolf, it meant reintroduction into Yellowstone, combined with strict protections against hunting. For the bald eagle, it largely came down to banning the pesticide DDT and protecting nesting habitat. Recovery funding comes primarily from annual congressional appropriations to the 2 managing agencies, along with state grants and revenues from firearms and fishing equipment excise taxes. The total federal investment in ESA recovery typically runs between $1.5 and $2 billion per year. That sounds like a lot. But divide it across 1,600 species, and the picture changes. Because that money is not distributed equally, not even close. Segment 5. The political trap. Here is where the story gets complicated and troubling. The ESA's delisting process, the mechanism by which recovered species are removed from the list, has become one of the most politically manipulated arenas in American conservation policy. And the damage it causes falls hardest on the species that need the law the most. Let's talk about wolves. By the mid-2000s, gray wolf populations in the northern Rocky Mountains, in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, had surpassed every single recovery target set in the original 1987 recovery plan. The plan called for a minimum of 300 wolves and 30 breeding pairs across 3 states, sustained for 3 consecutive years. The actual population had reached more than 1,500 animals. 5 times the target. By every biological measure, the recovery was a success, and yet the wolf stayed on the list. Not because the science said it should, but because a wave of federal lawsuits kept it there. Between 2008 and 2011 alone, wolf management in the northern Rockies was the subject of at least 9 major federal court challenges, most of them filed by environmental litigation groups. Now, litigation is a legal right. And many of those organizations do genuinely important conservation work. But when the legal strategy is to challenge a delisting that the agency's own scientists have certified as biologically sound, the question has to be asked: who is this serving? The answer, at least in part, is institutional self-interest. High-profile, charismatic species, wolves, bears, eagles, are fundraising engines. Keeping them listed, keeping them controversial, keeping the legal battles alive, that generates donor dollars. Federal lobbying disclosures show that several major environmental organizations spend millions annually influencing wildlife legislation, with explicit focus on preventing or delaying delistings. Industry plays the exact same game from the other direction. Livestock associations, hunting organizations, mining companies, they lobby against listings and push for premature delistings, not out of biological concern, but out of economic self-interest. The result is a list that reflects the politics of wildlife, not the science of it. And the species caught in the middle, the ones that genuinely need protection right now, pay the price. Segment 6, the displacement effect. The ESA list is not infinite. The Fish and Wildlife Service operates with a finite budget, finite staff, and finite political bandwidth. When a species that has already recovered continues to occupy a protected slot and draw on agency resources, something else doesn't get protected. The numbers are stark. Fish and Wildlife Service expenditure reports show that in recent years, just 10 species, out of more than 1,600 listed, have routinely consumed between 50 and 70% of all recovery spending. 10 species. 70% of the money. The top recipients are invariably the species with the biggest public profiles and the most organized advocacy behind them. The ones with documentaries. The ones on t-shirts. The ones that make people open their wallets. Meanwhile, independent scientific assessments have identified hundreds of listed species that are sliding toward extinction because they have never received a meaningful recovery investment. Freshwater mussels. Native plants. Obscure fish species, insects. These animals provide irreplaceable ecological services. They filter water, pollinate crops, anchor entire food webs. Their extinction ripples through ecosystems in ways that no charismatic megafauna can compensate for. But they don't sell merchandise. And then there's the backlog. At various points in the past 2 decades, the candidate list, species that federal scientists have officially determined need ESA protection but haven't been formally listed yet due to resource constraints, has exceeded 250 species. 250 animals and plants that the government's own biologists say are in danger, waiting in line. A 2019 analysis by researchers at Yale University found that species stuck in that candidate backlog had significantly higher extinction rates than species that received timely listings. The conclusion was direct. Bureaucratic delay, fueled in part by misallocated resources on the existing list, was contributing to species extinction. We are letting animals go extinct because there is no room left in the waiting room. Segment 7, the charisma gap. Consider 2 species, the bald eagle and the rusty-patched bumblebee. The bald eagle was delisted in 2007. Its recovery was real, documented, and uncontested. The process worked exactly as intended. The eagle is now thriving under other protective statutes. That is what success looks like. The rusty-patched bumblebee was listed as endangered in 2017, after losing more than 87% of its historic range. It pollinates dozens of native plants and agricultural crops across the upper Midwest and Northeast. Its listing was immediately challenged by pesticide and agricultural interests. Its recovery plan has been delayed. It has received a fraction of the funding its status demands. The bumblebee has no documentary, no viral campaign, no merchandise. And right now, it is dying. Segment 8, closing the Endangered Species Act is one of America's most important laws. It has pulled species back from the edge of oblivion. It has established the principle that the interests of all living things have legal standing in a democratic society. It deserves to be protected, but protecting the law means demanding that it work the way it was designed to work. Science, not politics, decides what goes on the list. Science, not fundraising strategy, decides what comes off. And the finite resources this law commands flow to the species that need them most, not the species with the loudest advocates. The measure of this law's success should not be how many species are on the list. It should be how many no longer need to be. So explain to me why animals that have been recovered to the standards that were outlined when they were put on the list haven't been removed to make room for the next animal. How are lawmakers allowed to go against their mandated directive to appease some individuals, a group, or corporation? Are we really willing to let 16 identified species disappear forever? These aren't animals being proposed. They have already gone through the vetting process and have been identified as endangered. If this story made you think differently about watching a condor fly or manatee swim, good. And if you want more topics like this, please like and subscribe, because there are a lot more stories buried out there.